2 decades ago, atheism got sizzling hot. Of the 10 best-selling atheist books of all time, 8 of them were published between 2004 and 2007. In 2004, neuroscientist and philosopher Sam Harris published The End of Faith, Religion, Terror, and the Future of Reason. In 2006, the preeminent evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins published his landmark book, The God Delusion. The following year, the great Christopher Hitchens published his wildly entertaining book, God is Not Great: How Religion Poisons Everything, which became a New York Times #1 bestseller. Other notable authors like Daniel Dennett and Victor J. Stenger also published books around this time, admonishing the irrationality of religion and extolling critical thinking and atheism. These books were read by millions, and debates and discussions featuring the big-name atheist thinkers of the day were drawing enormous crowds at live events and raking in huge view counts on YouTube. Channels like mine, which were devoted primarily to the topics of atheism and skepticism, began to thrive. Our atheism even became a default subreddit on Reddit, which, as we all know, is the true marker of success. This was all branded the New Atheism movement, but really the only thing that was new about it was that people were finally taking it seriously. And that makes sense. Islamist extremists use God as a pretext for the terror attacks of 9/11. Then Christian nationalists use God as a pretext for the US invasion of Iraq.
They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
But 20 years later, this once burgeoning social and intellectual movement has become a 2-ring shit show. That's right, it doesn't even qualify for a 3rd ring. That's how shit of a show it really is. I mean, Sam Harris is still kicking around, writing books, doing speaking engagements, and hosting a bunch of podcasts, which are mostly about how good meditation is, and objective morality, and how Islam is bad. I personally don't care much for him, but I would not call myself a hater. Christopher Hitchens, easily the greatest of the so-called new atheists, as well as the greatest rhetorician and debater of my lifetime, withered away and died before our very eyes. Dawkins' work as an evolutionary biologist and a popularizer of science was both impressive and influential. I mean, the man literally coined the term meme, for fuck's sake. But everything I hear from him now is just turf garbage. Daniel Dennett is dead. Victor J. Stenger is dead. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, another notable figure in the New Atheism movement, is now a Christian who says that the Judeo-Christian tradition is the only answer to the problems of the modern world, whatever the hell that means. Her views on the Judeo-Christian tradition remind me a lot of Homer Simpson's views on alcohol.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Our atheism was removed from the Reddit default list amid growing public sentiment that atheists were a bunch of obnoxious assholes. Content creators like me transitioned away from atheist content into an era of anti-feminist and anti-SJW content, which was ultimately subsumed by the MAGA movement and consequently submitted itself back to Christianity, which is why you have creators who once proudly identified as skeptics now carrying water for Western religious traditions. Other atheist content creators of old have simply transitioned to non-religious sources of content as the social momentum behind new atheism fizzled. Thunderfoot, for example, now primarily makes videos ragging on Elon Musk, and they are pretty successful. Plenty of atheist creators are still making atheist content, though. Dark Matter 2525 has been killing it lately. His videos are better than ever. They're thoughtful, poignant, deep, and seem to reflect a personal and intellectual growth that is sorely lacking in many older creators. And speaking of older creators, Matt Dillahunty is still out there arguing for atheism. Rationality Rules is still out there arguing for atheism. Aaron Ra is still out there with the same camera he's been using since 2009, arguing for atheism. Meanwhile, Cosmic Skeptic, aka Alex O'Connor, who started making content a bit after the new atheism fad had already died down, is doing very well for himself, focusing on atheistic, scientific, and free thought topics, routinely getting hundreds of thousands of views on his uploads. So I hope I've made it clear that not everyone who is connected to new atheism as a movement has become a pathetic sellout to the very sort of irrational, dogmatic stuff that they once combated, but a shockingly large number of them have. Others just, vanished, perhaps sensing they had nothing left to say. At times, I've wondered if I should have just vanished as well, but with all due apologies to those who hate me, I no longer have any such contemplations. Back in the day, I was on the cutting edge of YouTube atheism, rising to the top of a heap of content creators just in terms of sheer viewership. I started the entire genre of anti-SJW content on this platform, creating a template emulated by many other atheist channels of the time who were looking to move on from the dying new atheism fad. My first foray into podcasting, The Drunken Peasants, created a show format that remains influential to this day. The first 10 years of my existence on this platform tell the story of a creator who was not just following trends, but setting them. Not just commentating on the discourse, but directing it. But in the last 8 years, my influence and drawing power have waned considerably. I no longer exist on the forefront of trends or social movements on this or any other platform. I have become, as a recent popular video by a creator called Magic Mush pointed out, the relic of a forgotten age. Here's an excerpt from his video wherein he draws some conclusions about me.
It's been a long road, a lot of twists and turns, and here we are at the end of our journey. I'd definitely say TJ is in the post-credits phase of his career.
Ouch! The post-credits phase of his career. What an evocative and brutal turn of phrase, right? After I watched his video, that line echoed in my mind over and over again, living rent-free, as they say. Nothing else he said really raised a welt on my ass. I mean, I've been playing this game too long to have thin skin, but that line was definitely brutal. I kind of feel like one of those 70s or 80s rock stars who has name recognition and can still tour on their old hits until they die, but basically no one cares about their new music. Like Alice Cooper can still tour big venues on the strength of School's Out and Poison and No More Mr. Nice Guy and so on, but his 2023 album Road peaked at number 160 on the Billboard charts. Now, I guess there's worse fates in life, but to me it kind of seems like a purgatory. As a creative, your current endeavors are received with tepidity and malaise, so you must forever reenact the accomplishments of some long-dead version of yourself in order to capitalize on the nostalgia for a time when your work was vital and impactful. Now, I'm being a little dramatic, of course. The content I make for this channel, coupled with the content that I make for my brother Scotty and Paul, I make with them rather, continues to pay my bills, keep me fed, keep me clothed. Still have a decent chunk left over for savings and investing and so on. When we did our live show in Las Vegas last October, well, not last October, the October before last, I got to look out on a small but packed theater of people who had come from all over the country just to see us. My videos are still watched and engaged with by a core audience of people who rate them well and give me praise for my insight, humor, and creativity. All in all, I have it better than most people in this country. Most people work thankless and exploitative jobs for grossly insufficient pay and have little to no energy left afterwards to devote any time to any sort of creative or recreational pursuit. Their health issues and mental health issues and so on and so forth are always put on the back burner because they have neither the time nor the resources to properly address them. So I should be and am tremendously grateful for what I have. But let's not get too bogged down in me. Let's resume the topic at hand, new atheism and its decline. So Google Trends data shows that searches for atheism have declined significantly in the last 2 decades, reaching an all-time low in July of 2021. This is especially puzzling when one considers the fact that, according to Pew Research, the percentage of American adults who identify as atheists has gone up from 2% in 2007 to 4% in 2023. Interestingly, though, about a quarter of those who self-identify as atheists do believe in some kind of higher power, meaning that they don't actually qualify as dictionary definition atheists. Complicating things further, the number of adults who identify as either atheists, agnostics, or religiously unaffiliated is actually about 28% of the population. And if you delve deeper into that, a large chunk of those who say they're agnostic or unaffiliated probably do meet the dictionary definition of atheist. So not all of the people who identify as atheists are actually atheists, and many people who reject the atheist label in favor of calling themselves agnostic or saying they have no religion are actually atheists. So to complicate things even more, many who claim to be religious are, in their heart of hearts, atheists, only they identify with religion for social or political reasons. So how many atheists are there really? Who knows? let's set that aside because the question at hand really isn't about the prevalence of atheism as a belief or non-belief, but about how the atheist movement that was spearheaded by guys like Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris, and Dennett lost steam. So in the years following 9/11, anti-Islamic sentiments in the West reached a fever pitch, and the new atheist movement offered people an intellectual framework to push back against Islamic culture and its dogmas. But let's not forget that people weren't just mad at Islam. Many people were also mad at George W. Bush, especially when it came out that he had not only ignored intelligence that warned of Osama bin Laden's plan to hijack planes and crash them into buildings, but that his administration had also lied to the American people to drum up support for his war in Iraq. And what was his excuse? Well, there were a few, but one of them was that God told him to do it.
June 2003, then President Bush reportedly having claimed that God told him to go to war. Mr. Bush reported as having said, quote, "God would tell me, George, go and fight those terrorists in Afghanistan, and I did. And then God would tell me, George, go and end the tyranny in Iraq, and I did."
America had basically been double-teamed by powerful religious extremists. First, the Islamist extremists attacked, killing thousands, destroying the two most iconic buildings in the New York City skyline, which is a devastating act against the American psyche. Al-Qaeda basically walked right up and punched us in the nose, and we saw our blood for the first time in a very long time, and it made us go a little nuts. So we turned to our leader, George W. Bush. His approval ratings immediately went from 50% to 90%. And does anybody remember what our folksy G-shucks 43rd president used his insane levels of trust and support that the American people give him? Do you remember what he did with those? He expanded the surveillance state, he expanded the police state, he cracked down on civil liberties, and he falsified intelligence reports to take the country into an unconstitutional war that was so disastrous that future historians may one day cite it as one of the major causes of the fall of the American empire. By the time he left office, his 90% approval rating had dwindled down to 22%, still too high in my opinion. Anyway, after being attacked by Islamic nutjobs and then kicked while we were down by evangelical nutjobs, sentiments toward religion, especially where politics were concerned, turned sour for a lot of people. So books and lectures about how Islam and Christianity are nothing more than irrational, hypocritical, and violent death cults felt very cathartic at the time. But now the wounds of 9/11 aren't so fresh anymore, and the reign of George W. Bush is merely a faded memory of a long-ago nightmare. 80% of Americans believe that religion's influence is on the decline, and even though Biden is a devout Catholic who attends church every week and ends every speech with mentions of God, only about 13% of Americans think he's very religious. Only about 4% think Trump is very religious. Gee, I wonder why. His commitment to Christianity seems so heartfelt and sincere.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal.
Yeah. And speaking of that orange pussy-necked nitwit, declining interest in my channel almost perfectly coincides with his rise as a political force in America. 2016 was the year Donald Trump got elected, and 2017 was the year that interest in my content underwent a drastic decline from which it is yet to recover. I've noticed more and more people glomming onto the narrative that my channel went into decline after I shoved a banana up my ass. That's demonstrably false. Bananagate was in 2011, and my channel's most fertile period of growth was from 2010 to 2016. Where my numbers and views went up each year. So my banana booty fun times were not a factor. But you know what was a factor? Trump. When the YouTube atheists became the YouTube anti-SJWs, they started attracting an audience that was not entirely atheist or secular. It was anyone who had a grievance with social justice warriors of any stripe, which included gamers who felt that feminism was ruining gaming, people who were tired of overt progressive messaging in movies and TV, men's rights activists, MGTOWs, incels, just to name a few. And so, what started off as a community primarily concerned with atheism was subsumed by broader culture war issues. On July 20th, 2011, I made a video called "It's Only Sexist When Men Do It." This video reached the front page of Reddit and really tapped into a lot of male frustrations in the culture at the time. The funny thing is, I knew that would happen even as I was recording it. I could feel, even as the words were escaping my lips, that this video would be impactful in ways that previous videos that I'd made were not. It was just there in the zeitgeist, waiting for someone to snatch it out of the air, and that someone happened to be me.
If you are enjoying this video, give it a like and subscribe to this channel. If you're not enjoying this video, correct the things that are wrong with you and try again.
So when the Atheism Plus schism happened in 2012, the YouTube atheist community already had a ready-made template for how to handle it. And from 2011 to 2016, the YouTube atheist community underwent a metamorphosis into the YouTube anti-SJW and anti-feminist community. A considerable amount of fuel was added to the fire in 2014 when Gamergate happened. Although I was never a Gamergater myself, I am often associated with the movement, probably because I was a prevalent anti-SJW YouTuber, and I did make several videos critical of Anita Sarkeesian, whom I saw as a prudish hypocrite, whose pop feminist sensibilities were shallow and idiotic. I want to make it clear that my non-participation in Gamergate was not due to any sort of condemnation of the movement. I'm just not much of a gamer, so I didn't feel like it was my fight. And frankly, when people tried to explain it to me, I went a bit cross-eyed. Nonetheless, a lot of videos that I made at the time certainly benefited from Gamergate's popularity. Videos with titles like Tumblr Feminism Strikes Again, and BuzzFeed Feminism, Bronuts and Fedoras, A Guided Tour, and Anita Sarkeesian versus Butts. They were doing considerable numbers for me. Views were pouring in, subscribers were pouring in. But all of that changed in 2016 when the anti-SJW movement on YouTube embraced Donald Trump. He was everything they'd ever dreamed of in a leader, apparently. He was a politically incorrect loudmouth who pissed off all the right people in their book.
When you get these terrorists, you have to take out their families. They care about their lives, don't kid yourself. But they say they don't care about their lives. You have to take out their families.
But for me, the Trump worship was a bridge too far. I think Trump is an authoritarian idiot who hates freedom and wants to impose a draconian right-wing social order on this country, and I made that opinion clear as his presidency played out. In the process, I alienated huge swaths of my previous audience, who now loved the guy because he made SJWs mad, and apparently triggering the libs is a pleasure so divine that it's worth carrying water for a theocratic fascist to accomplish. But that's only the organic half of my channel's decline. The other half is concerned with changes made to the YouTube algorithm in 2016 and 2017, but those two are related to Trump. The mainstream media was scared. The rise of Trump, despite their best efforts to tear him down, showed them that their power and influence was waning. And rather than introspect about this, they decided to wage war on independent media sources, and their primary target was YouTube. They constantly ran stories about advertisements on YouTube being played before incendiary and hateful content. This in turn caused many advertisers to abandon the platform until they could get assurances from YouTube that their ads would only be placed in front of advertiser-friendly content. So in September of 2016, YouTube rolled out new guidelines that represented a shift towards family-friendly content, but really family-friendly was just a euphemism for advertiser-friendly. And as a YouTuber who never wanted to make family-friendly content, or advertiser-friendly content for that matter, this was a big blow. But things got worse because all throughout 2017, YouTube continuously tweaked their algorithm in ways that took my content out of people's suggestions. I constantly heard from fans that YouTube was unsubscribing them from my channel against their will. So, between YouTube stifling my artistic expression in the form of restrictive content guidelines that were and are completely anathema to the style of content I prefer to create, and my refusal to follow the anti-SJW movement off the Trump cliff, and the algorithmic suppression of my channel, 2017 was just a perfect storm of fuckery that pinned me down and has kept me there ever since. What were once my greatest strengths have all been turned into my greatest weaknesses. The fact that I was never explicitly on anybody's political team used to mean that I could appeal to people from all political teams. Now it means I can't appeal to any. The fact that I am brash and opinionated used to help my content stand out to audiences. Now it makes it stand out to YouTube censorship. YouTube's old algorithm used to push my videos out to new people, ensuring that I could always outpace my high unsubscribe rates by continuously attracting new viewers to my channel, but now I'm almost impossible to discover organically on the platform. And I can't rely on any sort of word of mouth to carry my name around because the people who do like me are kind of embarrassed by the fact, since I'm such a fucking weird and unlikable asshole. But there I go again, making everything about me, so please excuse my gargantuan fucking ego. Let's rebroaden the discussion. Americans probably don't even see evangelical Christianity as a threat at this point. They think its influence is on the decline. They don't see Trump or Biden as particularly religious men. They don't remember the way Bush used God as a pretext to lead our country to catastrophe. So given these perceptions, it makes sense that most Americans feel no strong impetus to invest their attention and energy into debates about Christianity. So what about Islam? Anti-Islamic sentiments are still pretty prevalent in America and in the West in general, but attitudes have shifted a little bit more positively since 9/11 has gotten further away into the rearview mirror. Ultimately, many of the people with vitriolic loathing of Islam have simply found other lenses than atheism through which to attack it. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, for example, was a former Muslim who became a major player in the new atheism movement. Sometimes she was even called the Fifth Horseman, the four horsemen being Dawkins, Harris, Hitchens, and Dennett. As I mentioned earlier, she's now a Christian, and even though she's an immigrant whose family fled persecution in Somalia, she now touts anti-immigrant rhetoric. She's become a standard-issue conservative nitwit, honestly. She hates trans people, she supports Israel, she moans about how pernicious social forces have destroyed the nuclear family and blah, 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 blah. She just holds every tedious and predictable position you can imagine when I tell you to envision an average right-wing colostomy bag of a human being. So she can go suck dog shit through a bendy straw for a nickel, as far as I'm concerned. One more example, Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad. Listen to this man who once identified as a skeptic bend the knee to Christianity.
It isn't that the new atheists killed Christianity. Instead, they spent a great deal of energy beating a dying horse. New atheism itself fizzled out when it turned out that there was no great Christian dragon left to slay, and out of its ashes rose the phoenix of social justice. The new atheists, with their dogmatic insistence on reason and science, cleared the path for the rational restructuring of society along gender, sex, and racial lines, what we now call woke ideology. This fact seems to have become apparent in the years after the new atheists, where the consequences of killing Christianity are bearing their poisoned fruit. Social breakdown, a failure of personal ethics, a lack of moral authority, the death of the desire to build things which are beautiful, and the creation of a vacuum which foreign religions will happily fill with their true believers. If you're wondering, I am myself still an atheist, but maybe somewhat regretfully. I think that any religious profession should be underpinned by a sincere conviction, and not a utilitarian calculus. I am not a Christian, but I am a supporter of Christianity, which is why we host Calvin Robinson's Common Sense Crusade on lotuses.com.
I mean, wow. The pick-me grift has reached new levels of putrescence. Hey Christians, what's up? I'm an atheist personally, but I just want to say you guys are totally right about everything, and I want to thank you guys for helping me in my tireless quest to save Western civilization from woke, CRT, DEI, or whatever buzzword we're slapping on everything we don't like this week. Anyway, here's my big British asshole. Could you do me a favor and just shove as much money right down that big gaping void as you possibly can? Oh yeah. That's great. That's really going to help me save the West, you guys. Oh. To summarize all this rambling into something approximating cogency, one reason why New Atheism declined is just that many of those involved were grifters who had ulterior motives and always served a different master. Who that master is varies from case to case. In the case of Ali, my guess is she just sincerely hates Islam and will side with any movement that hates it right along with her. In the case of Sargon, I think he just serves Sargon, which I suppose I can begrudgingly respect to an extent. Another reason why New Atheism declined and got a bad rap, a spotlight was shown on atheism, and a lot of what it showed is that atheists are a bunch of loud, edgy, angry, cringy autists with no social skills. You know, like me. I've always occupied a strange place in this movement. At one point, I was easily the most popular atheist content creator on YouTube, but I was far from the most respected. Despite my ubiquitous and overwhelming presence in the YouTube space, I don't know of a single instance wherein I was mentioned by Dawkins or Harris or Hitchens. If they were aware of me at all, they kept their opinions to themselves. And among my peers at the time, I was largely ignored or used as an example of how an atheist should not be. Many felt I was too loud, too edgy, too in love with the sound of my own voice, which is all true. Many felt that I took controversial stances just to get attention, which is also true. I was never taken all that seriously in that space, and yet to this day I still hear from people who watched my content at difficult times in their lives and derived both emotional strength and intellectual argumentation from me. And even many of the people who didn't agree with me still watch me because I was funny and outrageous and not even a little afraid of, pissing people off. I can't tell you how many times I've heard some variation of the imbecilic phrase, atheists are just as bad as religious people. atheists are just as dogmatic as religious people. And those sentiments spring forth from a very shallow place in the human psyche, because all people really mean when they say that is that in the same way they don't really want to hear about someone's religious beliefs, they also don't want to hear about atheism. They really make no distinction between atheists and religious people, because to them both groups are just people who won't shut up when I'm trying to sit here and be stupid. These are people who don't see a difference between religion and atheism because they don't possess a molecule of intellectual curiosity in their entire bodies. And because of these jack-offs, atheism got labeled as obnoxious and cringe. But really, the biggest reason why New Atheism declined was because of something I've been hinting at throughout this whole video. It's because at the end of the day, atheism is not an ideology. Atheism has no dogma, no doctrine, no philosophy, no politics. Atheism is just the lack of belief in any sort of God or gods. Before Richard Dawkins was even born, all the way back in 1882, a guy named Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche realized that God is dead. Now, what did he mean by that? Did he mean that the corpse of God is rotting up in heaven while the angels are all gathering around going, what the fuck? No. What he meant was that the Enlightenment had killed the concept of God, had killed the idea that life is organized around some sort of divine order. And Nietzsche was, for the most part, okay with that, since he, thought religion was pretty dumb. But he had a fear. And he had a fear that nothing would rise up to take religion's place, and humanity would become nihilistic and destructive as a result. So Nietzsche was like, well, maybe through art and through dedication to self-improvement and individualism, humanity can overcome nihilism. His basic idea was God is dead, so we got to become God-like ourselves. We must create and live by our own values. We must transcend all previously existent dogma and embrace and develop strength and freedom, finding joy and affirmation in this life rather than holding out for hope of some kind of wonderful afterlife. But Nietzsche's solutions don't really matter at this juncture. What matters is the problem he identified. God is dead. Okay. But God, that is to say Christianity, has traditionally been a huge part of Western culture. So what happens when we take out that Jenga block, right? What remains? Which institutions and traditional norms survive and which ones die? So the insecurity of those questions and the insecurity they invoke are the reason why you see so much of this cultural Christianity bullshit going around these days, right? Dawkins might have written the most influential and important atheist book of all time, but ultimately he proved himself to be the vast inferior of Nietzsche on this topic, because whereas Nietzsche said, God is dead, so how do we handle that? What does this mean for us? I have some ideas about that. Dawkins is just a fool who says, God is dead, but everyone just carry on like normal.
We are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer. But there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country.
And it's such a silly sentiment, yet it's getting more and more popular these days. So many atheists these days claim they are proponents of adhering to almost every scrap of Christian dogma and Christian social organization, even though they're well aware of the fact that God is dead. Christianity doesn't really work without God, you morons, okay? At least Ion Hersey Ali was smart enough to figure that out and start pretending to believe in God. Like, imagine you're being held at gunpoint by a robber, he's like, give me your wallet. And you start to hand him your wallet, but then he reveals the gun is fake. It's made of rubber, there's no bullets in it. It's no deadlier than a tube of chapstick, right? Are you still gonna give him your wallet and be like, I am a cultural armed robbery victim. Even though the gun isn't real, I still prefer the comforting social arrangement of giving the robber my wallet. And if you think that analogy is absurd, you're wrong, because that's all Christianity is. It wants your wallet. And God is the gun it uses to get it. And idiots like Soygon of a Fraud and Bichard Squawkins know that God is a fairy tale, but they still want to go along with Christian dogma. Why? Well, Sargon, because he can grift off it. Dawkins, because he's an old, scared man. Reasons may vary, but when you've had the God gun held to your head every day for your entire life and you're told, do what I say, or I'll use the God gun on you. There are people who, when the God gun is revealed to be bullshit, instead of being relieved, they get all scared and they're like, well, what am I supposed to do now? And their solution is, well, I'll just keep complying anyway. And it takes a world-class coward, folks, to fear a threat that they know is empty. But cultural Christianity is just one answer to the problem of God is dead. Now what? Anyone here remember Atheism Plus? The term didn't last very long, but the idea survives. In the wake of Elevator Gate, an event that's so small and stupid, it probably doesn't even deserve to be called an event. It certainly doesn't deserve the gate designation. After Elevator Gate, there was a schism in the atheist community. So Elevator Gate, for those who don't know, some guy at an atheism conference read the vibe wrong, and he asked skeptic blogger Rebecca Watson if she wanted to come back to his room for coffee while they were in an elevator together. She decided this guy's failed attempt at Riz was enough justification to use her platform to put him on blast.
Just a word to the wise here, guys, don't do that. I don't really know how else to explain how this makes me incredibly uncomfortable.
And a bunch of people, including Richard Dawkins, were like, dude, fuck you, Rebecca. You got hit on by a guy. You rejected him. He left it there. He accepted it, and he left you alone. And that should be the end of it. But she didn't accept it, and that was not the end of it. An atheist blogger named Jen McCreet used her Free Thought Blogs blog to let us know that atheism had become a boys' club where ladies don't feel safe, and we need to clean the place up. And her solution was a third wave of atheism. And this was Atheism Plus. So what's the plus for? Well, Jen explains, we are atheists, plus we care about social justice, atheists, plus we care about women's rights, plus we care about racism, plus we care about homophobia and transphobia, plus we use critical thinking and skepticism, plus blah, 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 blah. And though he didn't coin the term Atheism Plus, the most ardent and public voice in favor of this nonsense was a guy named P.Z. Myers, who had been an activist for atheism years before the New Atheist movement started up. But if there was ever a guy who despised the New Atheism movement, it was P.Z. Myers. He did not like that crude lowlives, like yours truly, had entered his space thanks to the likes of Harris Dawkins, popularizing atheism in the marketplace of ideas. He saw Atheism Plus as a way to exclude us by redefining atheism as inherently progressive and feminist in nature. The schism only deepened when Free Thought Blogs banned popular YouTuber Thunderfoot from their platform after he pushed back against their agenda. PZ and friends wanted atheism purged of ne'er-do-wells and other assorted undesirables, and eventually they got their way. To an extent, anyway. Most of the atheists who they deemed problematic, crude, or misogynistic became religious, or embraced cultural Christianity, or simply drifted out of the atheist space as the social momentum died down. In other words, it took a few years, but they ultimately did achieve the purge they were after. What they didn't succeed at was turning atheism itself into a dogma or popularizing Atheism Plus as a movement. If Atheism Plus was a movement, it was a bowel movement, and it did exactly what it was designed to do. It cleared the room. They just had to plug their nose and live with the smell for a while, and then voila, when the stink cleared out, all of their enemies were gone. So now we have a situation where many atheists have bent the knee to Christianity because that is what their right-wing politics demand. We have atheists who have essentially fused their atheism and their leftism to create a secular purity cult so that they can feel special and above it all as they sneer contemptuously at a burning world that they really have no genuine desire to save. Or if they do have any desire to save it, that desire is far outweighed by their aversion to rubbing elbows with the unclean masses who they see as beneath them. Early on, many atheists championed the fact that our movement was politically diverse, that it contained people from all over the political spectrum. But as you can see, that didn't really last. The righties went right, and they made up with Christianity, and the lefties went left and insulated themselves in a warm blanket of their own smug self-righteousness. It turns out that not believing in God was not nearly a strong enough social adhesive to keep a movement together. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche had his flaws, but at the end of the day, he is the only thinker that I know of to actually grapple with the full implications of the death of God. When faced with the same conundrum, new atheism floundered and factionalized along political lines. So, once again, why did new atheism decline? Hopefully by now you're ready for what I think is the real answer. New atheism declined because it didn't go far enough.
You're goddamn right.
All the thinkers of new atheism worked to tear down the concept of God in all of its insidious forms, but they always made sure that they never went so far as to tear down the other irrationalities upon which our civilization is built, because just like Nietzsche before them, they feared the N-word. No, not that one. I'm talking about nihilism. The abolition of God should have been just the beginning. The cultural Christians want to acknowledge that God is dead, but keep Christianity going anyhow. The Atheism Plus dorks would rather feel superior than dirty their hands with the work of changing this world. Sam Harris, immediately after tearing down God, set about the work of preserving Judeo-Christian morality by devising a flimsy, pseudoscientific basis for its preservation. Richard Dawkins jumped right on board with that nonsense, of course. Across the spectrum of new atheists, we see that figure after figure, thinker after thinker, activist after activist, essentially wanted to kill God but preserve everything that flowed forth from the concept of God. So let me be the one to spoil the fun. God is dead, and everything that sprang forth from God is also dead. And so to the extent that we continue to adhere to it, we are living in a world of death. I call this time in human history the age of living death. We are disconnected from both our sense of higher purpose and from our base humanity. The higher world cut off from us, the lower world cut off from us. And this paradigm has to end. The shadow of God must fade. Am I still an atheist? No. I've gone a step beyond atheism. It was a step, it was a stage, but it's past. The mono-god of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism is death. So what then is life? Life are the gods within me and within you. We all contain a spark of the divine, and we can use that to shape this world to our whims, but we cannot create the new without letting the old perish from this earth. We authored every god or goddess in all of history. So what does that tell you? It tells you that we are the true gods of this world, and always have been. And after years of delusion, it's time to accept the truth, and to take our power back from the specters of past creations. We made this world before, and we can make it again. New atheism is dead, but the new chaos emerges, and from the new chaos shall emerge the new order, and this will belong to us. We will no longer live in the tired prescriptions of the past, nor will we impose our prescriptions onto the future. We will create a world of the people, by the people, and for the people. And those who stand in our way are traitors against humanity and suppressors of true divinity. And we'll have to do our best to enlighten them, but if they can't follow us, then they're just going to have to be left in the dust. So let's get into the fray.
If you enjoyed this video, congratulations on being an enjoyer of the finer things in life. You should show your appreciation by leaving a like, subscribing to this exquisite channel, clicking the link in the description, and surrendering to the chaos of your true self. Carpe noctem, beautiful bastards.